The public, members of the press, any other members I've forgotten about. Welcome along to this meeting of the Performance Policy and Partnerships Committee. Welcome to Councillor Amundsen on Zoom. We have an apology from Councillor Arnold, if somebody would like to move. Councillor Scout, seconded Councillor Clark. Put that, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Which brings us to the report of the Invercargill Youth Council. We've got Libby, Alexander and Katiana who have come along with Ollie. If you want to take the Graham Norton seats up at that table there and hold on real tight. Welcome along. Councillor Crackett and I were both at the last meeting for the Youth Council and I commend you. You're a particularly engaged group and really nice to work with. Thanks very much for your report. There's one of the other items in there that you were going to speak to was the Poppy Flight event, which I think His Worship was at last week as well, and anything else you're wanting to enlighten us on. The floor is yours. Just remember, whoever's having a turn, if you can just make sure that microphone is in front of you, please, for those who are on Zoom.
Kia ora, I'm Alexander and I'm the Deputy Chair of the Unders.
I'm Katiana and I am one of the chairpersons of the Unders.
Hi, I'm Libby and I'm one of the chairpersons of the Overs. So the first thing that the Youth Council would like to cover today is about the waiata and pepeha. So Georgia, the corporate planner, did a session with us at the last Youth Council meeting about pepehas, and we all went through ours and learned how to write them and things like that. And so now we're just working towards incorporating these into our formal occasions. So with that, we're thinking that at our Youth Council meetings, we might have someone start off with our combined meetings by doing the pepeha, and we've also been learning the council waiata, which is what we use to open our combined meetings once the Unders and Overs come together, and we also sang it at the Poppy Flight. Welcome.
Going along with the Poppy Flight, well, once we got there, we welcomed in the knitted artwork that was travelling around New Zealand, fundraising for the RSA and the Starship Foundation. It flew in with the pilot on a tiger moth, and we welcomed him in with the council waiata. Then Mayor Tim added to this waiata with one of his own. And then we took a photo for the paper with the artworks, and you can head to our Facebook page to see the photo from the Poppy Flight. And also about innovating streets, our representatives met with our comms team and talked about how innovating streets will work, and we are looking forward to further discussion on how we will provide a youth voice on this.
Kia ora. To start off with, I'll talk about the long-term plan. Some of our members, Billy and Tyler, are going to talk to the schools about how young people can put a submission in. Other members are attending 2 of the engagement events for the long-term plan. We were lucky enough to be offered a behind-the-scenes tour last week of the Hydro Slide, which was really cool. And we're really stoked to be invited to ride the new Hydro Slides before the public, and that is tomorrow evening. We look forward to being involved with the official opening on the 19th of April.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We certainly look forward to hearing your feedback on innovating streets. I know there's some new developments coming up there, and your feedback on that's going to be really important. And also appreciate you going out and sharing the word about the long-term plan. Obviously, as we build the city and plan for it 10 years at least into the future, 30 years for infrastructure, we're building it for you. So what you think is important, and if you're able to encourage your peers, schoolmates to do the same, that's just wonderful. Thank you for that. Councillors, are there any questions of the Youth Council representatives? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited about the ability and the input of the Youth Council these days. And Katiana, how did you enjoy being a member of the Creative Community Council Committee yesterday? Quite an experience, I would have thought.
It was a very good meeting, very informative as well, having not been on a committee like that before, and just observing as well how it worked and what was going on. It was very interesting. I'm very excited for all the further meetings.
And we're very pleased to have you and Neil on that committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's nice to spend somebody else's money, especially when you see when it's going to really good projects. It's a good thing to be involved with. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Any other questions from councillors? If not, I'm prepared to move that the Invercargill Youth Council report is received. There's a seconder. Councillor Lewis, thank you. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much for coming along. Know that you've got to leave school pretty promptly to get here for our 3 o'clock start, so we do appreciate that. You are welcome to stay and watch how the rest of the meeting proceeds, or get on with your lives. It is up to you. But thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, we've got the minutes of the Performance Policy and Partnerships meeting from Tuesday 9th of March. Would somebody like to move that it's a true and correct record? Councillor Pottinger, Councillor Soper. So open for questions, comments or feedback.
Mr. Chair, just on my schedule I've got an item to discuss the agenda, and I don't seem to have it listed on my schedule.
To discuss which agenda, sorry, Sir Tim?
This one, and it's to discuss the agenda, and there isn't an agenda on my schedule. That means we've left that one behind. I'll probably pay to leave it. It doesn't appear anywhere.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the March 9th meeting, it's been moved and seconded. If no one has any points to raise, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Minutes of the Extraordinary Performance Policy and Partnerships meeting on March 29th. Excuse me, Councillor Soper moved. Councillor Skelt seconded. Any questions or comments? If none, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. The report on the proposed name change in relation to the subdivision of Sunrise Drive. Mr. Day has a report. This was originally on the agenda for the last meeting, but there were a couple of issues around it that we went back to the developer with. Mr. Day, if you'd like to speak to the report, please.
Kia ora, Chair, Councillor and Council and Your Worship. The report that's presented before you I'll take as read. We have gone through and discussed with the subdivision occupants and also owner, and this report comes back having been approved by all those mentioned.
Thank you. So there are two recommendations there. I'm looking at Councillor Lewis because I know that you were having discussions with a couple of the parties. Are you happy to move them?
Absolutely. I'd like to move that the report received and the name that we choose is option 1, Arcadia Place. This is in conjunction with the quite extensive discussions that went between the submitter and the concerned residents in that area, and I'm so pleased that a consensus has been achieved, and the residents, I think, will be delighted to have their first choice. So thank you to the submitters, and also thank you very much to the developer for the compromise that he may have made. Thank you.
I'll second that.
As seconded, Councillor Abbott, thank you for that. Any other points or comments that anyone has to make? If not, I'll put the motion then. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. That brings us to the Invercargill City Council's enforcement policy. I think there was some feedback around one of the items. However, you've had a chance to have a look at the report from Mr. Morris. Are you going to add into that afterwards, Darren, or is Michael going to? Okay, thank you. Michael.
Thank you, Kia ora Chair, Councillors, Your Worship. So this is our enforcement policy. We've brought it back for its adoption, and as the Chair has alluded to, there is one small change we're going to make to it. It's been brought to our attention, thank you, Mr. Mackenzie, in relation to our missing HASNO, so the Hazardous Substances Act from the enforcement policy. So Council does, as a territorial authority, have a small jurisdiction in this area, and so it should rightfully be included. So at paragraph 2 of the policy, where we set out the various acts that we act under, we're going to add in a small paragraph to cover off our obligations under the Hazardous Substances Act. If you would like, I can read out the paragraph.
Does anybody want the paragraph read? Silence reigned and we all got wet. Good save.
I am obliged. And outside of this, we're really looking forward to having this policy in place. It will provide a great level of guidance to our compliance teams, and we're looking forward to developing the strategy underneath it on how we give effect to it. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michael. So there are 2 recommendations. So the first is receiving the report and then adopting the enforcement policy. If we can add with the suggested change to incorporate has no obligations. Is that sufficient?
That would be sufficient, yes, sir.
Did I say suggest? I'd please take it out there. Councillor Soper.
Happy to move both the recommendations, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
With the inclusion of HASNO.
With the inclusion of HASNO.
HASNO. HAZNO, sorry.
HSNO.
HS. It's a long time since we did the district plan, which was the last time I dealt with it. Sounds like somebody's sneezing. So moved Councillor Soper. Sorry, seconded by Councillor Abbott, wasn't it? Yep. Was it Councillor Scott? My apologies.
Can be.
I'll take guidance. Was it? Yes, thank you. Questions or comments? Cool. Put the motion. All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Which brings us to the quarterly financials. Jamie. Welcome along. So first of all, noting that this is to the quarter end of December, and we're seeking leave to have the financials for the next quarter received in June, just running slightly behind because of some of the processing and resourcing issues.
Correct, yep.
Thanks, Jamie. The floor is yours.
Cool. I'll take the report as being read, but I will highlight a few of the key points. So yeah, for the quarter of the 6 months ending 31st of December 2020, currently in a deficit of 1.9 million, but this is a better position than what we'd forecast and also where we were this time last year as well. Some of the key points to note, we've received 3 million of funding for the Three Waters stimulus projects over the first half of the year. Capital expenditure is currently running behind forecasts. However, this normally picks up during quarter 3 and quarter 4. The holding company is planning to repay ICC advance of 30 million, which we advanced to them in 2016. Of which, when ICC receives it in quarter 4, we'll use it to pay off some LGFA borrowings. So there'll be no net debt impact there. We have done some forecast changes, increasing subsidies and grants by 4.8 million. That's to cover funds we have received or will be receiving from shovel-ready projects and also the Three Waters stimulus, which I've mentioned earlier. We're bringing forward the Stead Street Stop Bank project. This is in line with the shovel-ready money we've received. But on the flip side, we've also reduced the core infrastructure renewal program to 70% of planned works, just because of the delays that we're currently seeing. We've also realigned a number of our balance sheet items to align with the opening balances of the annual report. All these have been reflected within the LTP forecasts as well, which is out at the moment. From a non-financial performance side, we currently have 12 KPIs which are sitting in the non-achieved range. This has gone up by 2 from last quarter. The 2 that have moved into this range now is library visits are down, and also the landfill tonnage, which we're supposed to be trending to be downwards, is actually higher than last year. Now, both of these have been slightly affected by COVID impacts, so they may fail this year, but next year we should be back on target for those. From the Treasury side, so in this section we have expanded it out to show borrowings and cash investments into separate graphs now. Just this highlights that borrowings and cash investments are higher than what we said in the LTP last time. However, when you combine them both, the net debt balances is lower than what we'd said in the LTP, so that's still a positive for the council. And we are planning to use surplus funds from the cash investments to pay off some of the debt as well, just because the interest rates are extremely low at the moment for term deposits, so we'll get better benefit by paying off our borrowings instead. Open to questions.
Thanks, Jamie. Just before I throw it open, the reduction of the core infrastructure capital renewal program of 70%, I'm not sure whether I'll throw this to you or Erin, but are we confident that we'll hit that 70% target?
I'll throw that to Erin.
Thank you, Chair. I think the key piece with the target of 70% is, to be honest, that's usually what we would achieve in a normal year in terms of our renewals and capital delivery. What we haven't been achieving is obviously in that space of major projects. So I would expect, in a normal year we'd achieve around that in the renewals. We're not at that space yet in major projects, and I don't expect that we will get to that in the couple of months we have left in this financial year. The other part is that, to be honest, with where we're at in terms of our financial system transition, we don't have great visibility week to week around where we are tracking in the renewals space either. So that's making it a little bit difficult for us to keep, I guess, pushing that along in the way that we normally would at this point in the year. So I wouldn't have confidence that we would hit that 70% this financial year.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Couple of issues. Jamie, in the report we've got here, we had a draft financial statement presented to the Risk and Assurance Committee, and there's some variation in the figures. So you might be able to help me with that. I guess the first one is that we've got some total income changes. Is that driven by extra money that we've received? Would change that report?
Most likely accruals that we've identified since the Risk and Assurance meeting.
Yep. The other issue is I noticed on the investment side of things that when I tally up what we've got sitting in banks, putting aside the other stuff, we've got about $49.5 million. And I noticed in the LTP documents that were put out that we were forecasting that we had cash investments of about 40 million. So is that just an error, or are we just sitting on I guess a bit of a buffer zone that might allow us to potentially use part of that remaining 9.5 million for some project work?
We're likely to use some of that excess to pay off the borrowings.
Sure.
but I will probably have to come away
Yep.
and have a look at that
So-
and come back to you.
Yeah, so that leads on to another question. Huh? If we, and you suggested before that we would use some of that potentially to reduce our borrowings, but then does that open up our percentage of borrowing that we can use in the formula for future work if we need it?
Yes,
It does. So that's a plus, isn't it?
it is a plus.
The other issue is that when I look at the reports, it seems that we have an ability in council, and maybe this is my ignorance, to change the year-to-date forecast. And this is not just in this report, but in previous reports as well. And I wonder what drives that, because from my experience is that you set a forecast out for a budget, and then you measure yourself on the actuals against that. It seems to me that having the ability to change the forecast partway through the year, I can understand it for income, but when you're talking about expenditure, that allows you to sort of, in some ways, be sort of superficially balancing the books, doesn't it?
So when we report at the end of the year, we're always reporting against the annual plan and the long-term plan.
Okay.
The forecast is there as a guide of where we're looking to be ending up at the end of the financial year.
Yep.
Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the latter one, but then maybe that's something I can explore with Michael at some later stage. I think
Yep,
that's probably
thanks.
the way to go.
Any other questions or comments on the financials? If not, there are 4 recommendations to be moved, if someone would like to put them forward.
Move those, Mr Chair.
Councillor Soper, seconded. Councillor Pottinger. If there are no further questions or comments, I'll put that motion. All in favour?
No.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Jamie. Which brings us to the activity report. Welcome return of Steve and Michael. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, Chair, Your Worship, Councillors. We'll take the report as read, and Darren, Michael and I are happy to take any questions. And through the Chair, if I may, Michael Day would also like to provide an update on some advice after conversations with some contractors. So,
Shall we start with that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So, over the last probably few months, the CE Claire, myself and Erin have been conducting sessions with our contractors and suppliers to understand their position in the industry at the moment and their capabilities from delivery perspective. From our perspective, through those sessions, 3 key themes came through. That there's the potential around increasing price in relation to the works engaged, in relation to securing resource for themselves at the moment is coming at a cost. That's one thing that came through. The other thing was the capacity for those suppliers and vendors to deliver with limited resources from perspective across. They are building their capability. It's going to take some time. The other item that they brought up for us was around raw materials and the supply at the moment. As highlighted, there is demands on some raw materials in the industry, and they highlighted that could potentially become a constraint as we go forward. I thought it was prudent to advise the council on this in relation to our pending LTP and just giving that insight into those sessions that we've been conducting.
Thanks, Michael. I guess some of those supply issues are not just ones for council, but ones that are out there in the general marketplace. Councillor Cricket, welcome along. Questions? Oh, sorry. Yep. Welcome, Alex. Councillor Soper.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's not so much a question as a comment from myself wearing 2 hats. Just to say that I was at the launch of the COVID-19 vaccination program yesterday at the Civic Building. Can I say from both those hats what a suitable venue that is for the process? And while I recognise that it's it's certainly useful to have up to 96,000 visits to the venue during the time, and that's a benefit to the Invercargill City Council. Can I just say that the DHB is very grateful at such an appropriate venue being available, and I think it will serve the purpose exceptionally well. The team who are doing the vaccination seem very happy with the venue and the support they've received. So thank you.
Thank you. It's good that we've got an accessible venue so centrally located, and we certainly welcome these tenants for the next while, which follows a year of a lack of tenants.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Regarding the vaccination program, is there adequate car parking set aside outside the Civic Theatre or nearby?
Thank you, through the chair. Look, we've worked with the DHB in providing car parking spaces primarily for the staff who are providing the vaccinations, and because their program's running from somewhere at 7:30 in the morning through until the end of the day, that's been the primary focus initially for council staff. We have undertaken to continue to review the car parking from the public point of view, and we'll be receiving feedback from the DHB staff as to how that is progressing over the next couple of weeks. Certainly the venue management team are very acutely aware of supporting the ongoing access, but that's one of the benefits of the Civic Theatre, is that there is ample car parking nearby.
And marked disability car parks as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the activity report? Councillor Scalp.
I'll just through you, Chair, just Michael, Steve, just on the points you made, was there any feedback from the contractors and so on about the time length of delays and bits and pieces? Do they perceive that to be an ongoing issue for some period of time, or was there a level of confidence that we may see ourselves out of that at some point in the near future?
So through yourself, Chair, the feedback we received in relation to timings was quite interesting, in respect that they're basically saying it's going to take time to build the capacity in the existing workforce that we have and industry. They don't see this as a local or regional issue. They see this as a national issue, and it's right across basically local government and the commercial side. It's not just a local government issue in that respect. Hope that answers that question.
Well, just on the materials, in the sense of lack of supply, is that possibly going to be prolonged for some period of time, or perceived to be?
Again, through yourself, Chair, there was no defined link to what type of raw material they were talking about at the time, and it was a theme that came through, so they didn't give us any specifics about what that was.
So falling out of that, obviously that leads into our capital project and what we're actually going to attempt to achieve in the timeframes we have and the timeframes we've got outlined in our LTP. So there's a word of warning for us around that. Is that what you're clearly indicating?
I'm just providing feedback, Councillor, from the suppliers and vendors. I'm not predetermining anything that they've stated.
Thank you. To be fair, Councillor, I think that it had also been signalled through the process leading up to the document, putting it out that there's an extensive work program. Some of it is time sensitive, and some of it can be resource sensitive as well. I think we saw some restrictions on timber that was available for the building sector recently, and steel, I guess, could be just as vulnerable. We don't know.
I know the trigger wasn't loaded through you, Chair. It was just getting information.
Yep. Absolutely. Councillor Pottinger.
I mean, it's a common theme right through the country, supply of both either labour, materials. But one thing that at least hopefully hasn't created the perfect storm is interest rates. They're still reasonably stable, and hopefully will continue that way where they are, because that would be, if they were to change in a negative way, then you would really have to rethink things. But as long as the affordability is there to match our plans, our financial plans, then the delivery time can be
can be accepted, I think. But financially, if the interest rates were to increase dramatically, then you have to rethink everything. Yeah.
Fingers crossed we don't find ourselves in
No.
that situation yet. I still remember back to the 20% plus in the 80s.
Huh?
That old.
Well, I remember my great-great-great-grandparents talking about it. Councillor Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to pay compliments to our library staff and please pass that on for the very good initiatives that are in this report. It's great to see that the library is being used in some pretty innovative ways to really be that heart of our community. And the other thing just wanted to acknowledge the Invercargill Public Art Gallery and museum staff acting together in Hei-Wakatuia and the exciting program they've got developed there. I think that's really showing that they're activating that facility. So please pass that on too.
See Mr. Marriott sitting up in the back, so he'll certainly take that opportunity as well. Any other feedback or questions, councillors? If not, thank you for what you've offered so far. Would somebody like to move the recommendation?
Moved. Seconded.
Councillor Rabbit and Councillor Lewis. I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Stephen Michael, thank you. Rhiannon. So we've got the Bluff Matapahui Tourism Master Plan.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. Yes, so this is an update on the draft tourism master plan that's been produced by Great South with support from Council and with iwi as well. So it lays out the results of the consultation that Great South has undertaken with the community. They had good feedback, good engagement, as well as a workshop that the Bluff Community Board held, and it outlines a suggested next steps for finalisation. So it's really presented here to you, councillors, so that you've got an opportunity to raise any further points that you would like considered as the plan is finalised. That finalisation will take the approach of looking at implementation, really. So it will be around prioritisation of projects from timing. Yeah, so it's an opportunity for feedback.
Thanks, Rhiannon. We've been engaged with this process through several steps along the way, but here it is, and good to see there's been feedback from quite a few other organisations as well. So, at Rhiannon's invitation, if there were any other points or feedback you wished to provide, now's a darn good time to do it. Councillor Soper.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Rhiannon, just wondered, the last time we had the councillors visit to Bluff, the Gun Pit Road development looked fairly exciting, and Doc was to be involved in that. Is Doc still fairly much on board with that? Do you know?
I don't have the latest information on that, but I can certainly ask and find that out.
That'd be great, just to know that they're still very much on board with it. It seemed like a good part of the solution to some of those Stirling Point over parking issues. Thank you.
Councillor Lush, have you had a chance to go through that master plan?
Yeah, look, it's hard for me to come at this stage and fully comment on it. I guess the question I have is about the council's attitude towards Bluff. Having read the plan and looking at almost a paternalistic attitude towards Bluff from the Invercargill city, and it seems as though the great reviver of Bluff is going to be tourism. However, I think we need to acknowledge the very distinct function that Bluff has. It's not like Otatara, it's not a commuter suburb, it's a separate place from Invercargill. And I wonder if Invercargill's solution towards Bluff is to make it a tourist destination, does it in fact absolve them from some of their responsibilities to make Bluff a functioning and exciting and vital town. For me, what is good as Bluff is good for tourism. And I think since Bluff's come into the council, come into their area. Unlike a lot of towns where the freezing works have closed, like Patia or Waitara, the town has managed to prosper despite very little engagement from Invercargill. And I just wonder if this focus on tourism is not slightly mislaid, and the real focus for the council should be on the community of Bluff itself. What I have noticed is that as soon as we mention tourism, is that people buy up houses in Bluff and turn those into Airbnbs, which means we've got a great rental loss for Bluff, that people can't find places to live. And these are people that work in the fishing fleet in the port. And I just wonder if we've got the whole focus on Bluff back to front. I think what we need, I mean, if we look at Bluff, we look at the town hall, which got given to us, which is terrible. We look at the library and the service centre, which is extremely run down. We look at the pool, which the community has to fund themselves. It seems the council does nothing for Bluff to make Bluff seem to be a great community. The great achievements we've got for Bluff are the marae, and probably the Oyster Festival, which are community projects. And I just think the council themselves has got the wrong attitudes towards Bluff and has kind of let it slip away. The playground needs to be fixed. It's not fit for purpose. And I just think that the council in future needs to look at Bluff not as a tourist destination. We know the signpost and we know the oyster and yada, yada, yada. They need to look at it as a community that is absolutely unique within New Zealand. And I think we'll see this with the history that's coming out. And I think I would like to certainly see part of the museum focused there. I certainly think that SMAG should have pop-up shows there in some of those buildings. And I just think we need to change the way we look at it, rather than, okay, the freezing works is closed, we're all a bit funny about Bluff. Let's get people to drive to the sign and give them a chance to take their photo. I think the council should focus on making Bluff a vital and exciting community. And I think if that happens, then the tourism will follow. I just think, for me, the feeling is we've got the horse before the cart. I'm sorry if that's a ramble, but I just feel that it's important that we say that, particularly since it's been a long time since we've had a councillor from Bluff on this council.
Thanks, Councillor Lush. I guess in feedback, the master plan is specifically about tourism, and that's just one aspect of what happens in Bluff. Everything else falls into the same category with everything else that we deal with in council, but within your comments there's some good feedback on things that we can pick up on. But just to reinforce, this is actually just specifically about tourism. It's really interesting to see how it's changed from my observation of taking a young person down to ride down Motupahui frequently, and that the tourists that are there are still plenty of camper vans that are visiting. It's just they're all being driven by Kiwis now. Not that they don't strike a few issues once they get to Stirling Point and some of the parking problems there. It's been really interesting as we've gone through the consultation process, not only with the Bluff Community Board, but also at the marae, when we worked through what the priorities were that the township was looking for, particularly with relation to tourism, what their suggestions were. But the wider Bluff issue, you've raised some good points, and they come up, like I say, through the annual plan, long-term plan process. But thanks for that feedback. Councillor Soper.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reassure Councillor Lush, I suppose. What I found in going to the Bluff consultation meetings was very much that emphasis on the live, work, play, and the visit and invest were the fourth and fifth parts. So even in talking about the master plan as a tourism development plan, if you like, the live, work, play was very much at the front of people's minds. And I think that was definitely the feedback the community was giving, and the feedback I took as a councillor, that we're not just talking about Bluff as a place to visit for a short term. We're talking very much about the top priority, and the community board at all the meetings I've attended, that's been very much the top priority for the community board. I feel that it's first a place that people live, work and play. It's a community, and I'd like to reassure Councillor Lush that people around this table, other councillors, are very aware of that, and will certainly keep that in mind.
Thank you. Your Worship, then Councillor Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've always been a fan of Bluff, and when I first moved down here, I said this is the crown on our tourism industry, and they have had pretty good political representation. Bruce Pagan was the mayor of Bluff, it's the township, and he had quite a bit of influence, even though he only won by, I think, about 100 votes or so. But he was dedicated, he was good at lobbying, he was, and houses were cheap. I'm not trying to have you on, Marcus, but houses were cheap when I arrived here. I brought a 3-bedroom house for $5,000. And there were a lot of people in that category, but that didn't really fix the problem. I think we've got to have an approach that's pretty widespread, and I know the urge is to develop our panacea of aquaculture, but that can sort of hit some really devastating problems in a short time. So I think a broad-ranging approach is probably the best one to take.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I commend Councillor Lush for his comments. I also have an interest in Bluff, not because I live there, because I quite like there. Many years ago, almost 100 years ago, I did some locums down there, and it feels like 100 years ago anyway. They now don't have a pharmacy, so I can talk about any conflict. But we must be also aware that some of the organisations from Invercargill, including our Wellbeing Fund, have actually financed recently quite a lot of money for Bluff, including money towards the information kiosk, which was discussed at length at the Bluff 2024 group last night. I didn't really participate in because I was actually really interested in what our plan for the kiosk is still under the planning system, and I think our parks are involved with that also. The murals that we put some money towards, which were applied, the money was applied for by the Bluff community to help with the tourism. So we have this mixture. I understand the housing things because that was also discussed informally last night. The number of sections that are more difficult to buy in Bluff, even just the ones with houses or without houses on. So there are two aspects. The Bluff people themselves seem to want an increase in tourism to help their economy. One comment has been recently about there's nowhere down there to get coffee on a regular basis for tourists, which puts tourists off. I don't know if we need to get involved with the commercial operations in Bluff themselves, but any help we can give them, I guess, and it sounds separatism, but I think it is important. We do give, I think, around about up to $300,000 a year towards the pool, in case anyone thinks we don't help with the pool. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? There's 3 recommendations if somebody would like to move. Well, we've kind of taken care of the third. Thank you, Councillor Soper. Moved. Seconded. Your Worship, thank you. I'll put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for your engagement, councillors. Local Government New Zealand, the annual general remits. Really the report from Mr. Thompson, who's unable to be with us this afternoon, highlights the time frame. So if you're thinking about things, now's the time to start thinking about suggesting them either at a workshop or to the chairs or at the next council meeting. We can start a discussion. It's also a good time to remind you that the conference itself is coming up in Blenheim in early July, and if anybody was wishing to express an interest in going, if you could email Claire by the end of the week, that would be useful, so we can get an idea of numbers attending and how that works in with budgeting. I know Councillor Crackett expressed an interest earlier this afternoon, but councillors, if you're interested in attending LGNZ, if you could email Claire by Friday, that would be really useful. Are there any comments on the report from Mr. Thompson?
Move that it be received.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving the two recommendations?
Both.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Kett. I'll put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the public meeting. Thanks to those who have joined us on the live stream. That'll be finishing as we move into public excluded, which I will move that we do for the reasons as outlined in the agenda, recognising that appropriate staff stay behind, in this case, Mr. Marriott.
And with I'll second that also with the addition of Mr. Jeff Grant and Lindsay McKenzie.
Thank you, Councillor Soper. Put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for your attendance.